Luis, how are you? I see you're a Searchfunder intern, I think. Is that right?
Yep, I'm doing well. I'm very excited for this event. Doing well.
Uh, Lewis is going to be hosting his own session this afternoon.
Very nice.
For our interns. I have just one more thing before we go live on Searchfunder. And then as folks are coming in, I'll do the announcements, news, and upcoming sessions.
Perfect.
So we are now live on Searchfunder. Great. Welcome everybody to our session on Workers' Comp and Safety 101. This is the first time we've had this topic on Searchfunder, and I am looking forward to learning a lot. I don't think without Todd raising this up at our last session, I would have even known to know that our searchers needed to have this info. So looking forward to this discussion today. So let's get started with announcements and news and then our upcoming events. So if you have not been on Searchfunder for a bit, welcome back. I want you to make sure that you know that we now have Data Axle that has gone live. That gives you company information. So you can go on there and say, hey, I'm looking for an event rental company within 50 miles of Portland, Oregon, and locate that. We also have IBIS World Reports, which our searchers have unlimited access to. And if you are a searcher, definitely utilize that. It's great for when you're trying to figure out what zones you should be hitting, whether your target company is at least within reach of average benchmarks, and then helping with evaluation. So great stuff there. We also have BVR deal stats for everyone on a Searchfunder, and we are a HubSpot for Entrepreneurs location, which means that you get a discount for HubSpot, either 30 to 90%, depending upon where you are in your search and the type of search that you're doing. We have tutorials about this on our past events page. You can get there by going to the upper right of your screen on Searchfunder. I guess I should point over here. And clicking on the little wedge next to your little profile picture, and then events, past events. And we've developed a great library of events. So definitely check out the ones that have the red video icon on there and scroll through that. Oops, I have skipped a few pages here. So let's go on to the news. I was thinking I had something else on there. Anyway, we have heard from True North Search that they are looking to fill their fall cohort, and the deadline will be July 30th for your application. And you may hear my office mates, Mavis and Aretha, in the background. They're getting ready to go out for their daily sojourn with the walker. So a little bit of excited activity going on in the background there. Next, we have Tony Capert doing his What to Look For When You're Acquiring a Blank Business, which I think is just an awesome series. His next session is on home care providers, and that ties in nicely with a session that we did with Live Oak about 2 weeks ago now. They talked about various verticals, and one of them was the home healthcare vertical. So if you're looking at that space, definitely check out Tony's session and combine that with the Live Oak session. Then we also did a session with Billy Van Eaton who owns a landscaping business, and he went into great detail about what you should be looking for when you buy a landscaping business. And I think that dovetails nicely with the work that Tony's doing on August 25th. So then let's talk about our live streams. We have 3 times. The first is our operations session, tackling operational issues that you might have. Today's somewhat like that, although this is more focused on due diligence. And then we have our search funder sessions, which includes our searcher success stories. So once you acquire a business, make sure that you put us on your calendar to talk to us within 3 to 6 months. We'd love to hear how you did it. And I know searchers really appreciate having that relatively real-time experience because you're searching in the same environment that they're searching in. And then we have our meetups, our brainstorms, and our happy hours. Many of them are now shifting more to kind of a workshop format where we're tackling specific issues that are unique to that group, also looking at challenges that individual searchers have, and trying to help them with that. And we've got a lot of great upcoming sessions. I wanted to point out that for the UK, we're going to have Garrett Lloyd, who is a search fund attorney, and he will be with us on the 25th. So that's just going to scroll through. We're now booking out into September, so we no rest for us over the summer season at all. So what I want to do now is welcome both Todd and Kathy here. I'm going to add your spotlights. There you go. And then add spotlight there. So, and I just welcome both of you to Searchfunder. So delighted to have you here. So I wanted to let you know that Todd is a client advocate with the Lockton Companies, and Kathy is the workers' comp team leader. She's a VP with Lockton as well. And she started her career out as a claims adjuster and has worked her way up. So she knows the ins and the outs and the details of workers' comp. So let me turn that over to you, Todd.
Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it. So, Search Funder community, glad to be back here. A colleague of mine, Allison Porter, and I did a Insurance 101 for search funders about a month ago. And during our discussion, workers' comp became a large percentage of it and allowed us to think there must be a little bit more interest for us to just dive deeper into it, because chances are each and every one of you going through the due diligence process is going to have to deal and learn about and experience workers' compensation. And let me back up and just talk about who we are, both Kathy and I. We work at Lockton Companies, and we are a insurance brokerage. And so some of you may have had some experience with insurance brokerage, but it's our role and responsibility to serve clients, businesses that need insurance, and we consult on their behalf to figure out what insurance products are relevant to their operations, their industry, and their property and their people and their risks. And we consult on how much to buy, what to buy, how to buy, and we of course then get competition driven in the marketplace with all the insurance companies and bring back the best options and recommendations and advice for our clients. And so how it applies to the search funder community is through a lot of the upfront, the due diligence process, and looking at a target and understanding what insurance policies are in place and are those going to be appropriate, what needs to be tweaked, changed, improved, enhanced, or what needs to stay the same. And we're realistic, knowing that at this stage, when you're looking to buy an organization and go and run it and grow it, you're not going to want to buy every bell and whistle available, but certainly want to have anything and everything that protects you, the organization, the people that will be working in the organization. And so today's conversation will be about workers' compensation. And thank you for the opportunity to present here and to talk. It's really going to be a dialogue. It's really going to be hopefully a Q&A session in large regard. For those that are on the line, I'm assuming that there's a reason and that you have some thoughts or you have some questions. And a few of you actually recognize from previous conversations or Search Funder presentations that I've been a part of as a participant as well. So Like mentioned by Karen, Kathy has been with the organization for 20 years. And 10 years before that, she was a claims manager and claims adjuster. She now leads a team of 44 people, and she's a vice president and claims manager at Lockton Companies for the Founder Series. And so I'm happy to have her as the subject matter expert. Just kick it off with some Q&A and some topics. But before that begins, Kathy, do you want to just say hi and talk to us about what work comp is and a little bit about what we should be focused on from a searcher's perspective?
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that. So workers' compensation is a no-fault system that allows injured employees to have their wages replaced and medical treatment provided in a rapid and efficient manner. And it's important to know it's no fault, because if they do something stupid, it's not a bar to recovery. And that may be one of the biggest hurdles people have to get over when they start to have to work in the work comp world. My husband is a science teacher. He says that they invented workers' compensation because quantum physics wasn't difficult enough. So it should be very simple, and work comp can be very complicated. And my intention today is to talk you through what I look for in a well-run work comp program, give you some tips about things to look for, things to think about as you consider building businesses. So go ahead, next slide. So where I decided to start is in the initial review, right? When you start to approach any kind of an opportunity, I thought I would outline the things that I think about when I'm asked to do this. And I get asked to do this on a very regular basis. And let me back up 1 second. I like to be interactive. If you have a question, I really wish you would answer it or ask it, because if you're asking me a question, other people on the line are probably thinking the same thing. So you're not interrupting. Feel free to use the chat feature and we will answer the question. So no problem. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we need to do is talk about what kind of data should you be asking for. And these are all points of information that are easy for any company to provide. They can get it from their claims administrator, from their carrier, or from their TPA. So if you ask an opportunity for this information and they tell you they can't get it, my antenna would go up at that point in time, because this is the easiest thing you can get. So what you want to ask for is loss runs for the last 3 full years. So if I were going to ask for it today, I would ask for it with the years ending 5/31. Okay. And I would like the last 3 years. And the things that you're going to look at are the frequency, the severity. You want to know the payroll dollars and the number of employees, and how many there are, because you're looking at exposures. And then you want to ask for a reporting lag time report. Again, this is very, very available. And if you can get it, you would like to know the number of litigated files in the caseload, in the loss runs. This is all information that everybody tracks. Any organization that administers workers' compensation can provide you with this information out of the chute. Next slide.
Kathy, I have a question, since you asked us
Yep.
to ask questions in between. And folks, feel free to put questions in the chat as well. Or we are a intimate enough group that you can also just unmute and ask. So what does the reporting lag time tell you about the business that you're buying? And are there like I don't know, like if a week is good or bad or anything like that. So if you could give some color on that, that would be really helpful.
So the measurement of reporting lag time is the number of days it takes to get from the date of the injury into the hands of the adjuster. So, for instance, if Todd gets hurt today and he tells me, and I'm his supervisor, and I don't get it into the hands of the adjuster for 10 days, then I would have a 10-day lag time. The thing you need to understand about lag time is that what the industry says, the claims industry says, you want claims reported in 3 days. Why? Because there have been a lot of studies that show that the longer that it takes to get a claim in the hands of the carrier, the more expensive the claim. So if I get Todd's claim reported in 3 days, then if I consider all other factors, that is going to be the least expensive that claim can be. If I wait and I sit on Todd's claim for 30 days, then it's going to be 50% more expensive just because it's not reported in a timely way. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One is that litigation drives cost in workers' compensation. So if it's not reported, if Todd tells me and I don't report it for 30 days, he's probably going to go get a lawyer in order to get his benefits. So that raises the cost. There are also delays in treatment, those kinds of things. So I view it as a measurement of how good that company is at managing their workers' compensation claims. So that's what that means. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. That was really helpful.
And I wanted to jump in with another quick question, slightly comment. So when we look high level, looking at an organization, Kathy, what things, if I'm looking to buy a company and then go and run it, should I look for even before I understand the details of a loss history? Because when I think about the frequency and the severity that goes into the workers' compensation experience modification, I'd like to just bring up this point and ask you, how much can you tell about the safety or the safety culture or the processes and procedures of an organization from the outside looking in to tell if you're going to have to make some remediation efforts in order to get, workers injured less often? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So when you start to look at claims, the thing I would do in some of my opening conversations is I would ask the people that you're speaking to, how do they handle workers' compensation? Because what they tell you or don't tell you is really important. If they say to you, gosh, we have a really aggressive return to work program. Okay, that can be great. But if the work is primarily heavy work, then I question that because that's not what I've seen. If they do lots of light industrial or office work, then that would make sense. When you start to talk about experience mods and workers' compensation, you're also talking about things like OSHA recordables. And this is why I sometimes think work comp is like quantum physics, to be honest with you, because I have seen companies that have lots of claims and very low OSHA recordable rates and very low mod rates. And it has everything to do with how they manage their OSHA recordables. So if they're committed to suppressing their reporting, if they really want to do that, then they can just say, no, you have to report this work comp injury as a personal injury. I've seen this happen. Or they'll say it doesn't meet OSHA requirements. So when I think about it, I would ask the next question, which is, talk to them about their OSHA rates, their OSHA recordable rates. What people tell you or don't tell you is critical. If they say we report claims and we get people the care that they need, that's my favorite answer, because what that tells me is that they're running a comp program that is appropriate. The costs are going to be in the middle or good. The severity will be good. And they're treating their injured workers with respect. If they say safety's everything and, we count the number of days that, since we've had an accident, I think that there are employers who are overly focused on that and they end up in a place that isn't very good because that's their only focus. I'm actually a moderate in terms of work comp claims management. I like things to be middle of the road. I want them reported timely. I want to do the things that are right for the injured workers. And the kinds and the employers that I work with that do the best job take that approach. Did I answer your question, Todd?
You sure did.
Okay.
That's perfect context for our conversation today.
Good. Okay. Next page, please. So here are some questions. Ask them in conversation, what's your policy about returning to work? What's your policy regarding reporting? And the third question that we haven't touched on yet is, what kind of relationships do you have with your local medical providers? And you're probably sitting out there going, why does that matter? Because if you work with an occupational medicine clinic or the local doctor and you have some claims, if you show them the work environment and they see that you really want to bring people back to work and develop a good working relationship and communication, it helps really manage the costs. I think that in something to know is the employer has the right to direct medical care in some states and not in others. But what I know is when you've set up a good relationship with a clinic, employees go there. Most of the time, they just want some help because they really want to feel better. So these are really important things. And if they don't have any of these policies and they have claims, then you may have an issue in terms of them not having a very good workers' compensation claims management program. Okay. So you have all this information. What are you going to do with it? So let's talk a little bit about due diligence. Next slide, please. So the first thing to do, and I tried to keep this very simple, but look at the average cost per claim. And all you have to do is take loss runs actually have columns with this information. And at the end of it, it'll say total incurred by year. And all I want you to do is divide that dollar figure by the number of claims. So if it says $500,000, there's 10 claims, it's $50,000 each. And you'll do it for all 3 years. What are you looking for? Well, the thing that you need to look for is that the average cost per claim should decrease year over year. So if it's $50,000 in the earliest of the 3 years, it should go down, right? If it's going up, then the company's experience, right, the way they're handling claims isn't working very well, and the claims are more expensive. So that's the first and most important thing to know. If the second thing is, you want to know what is their frequency going up. So when we talk about a frequency rate, what we want to know is when we normalize the number of claims by the number of employees, what is that number? And I'm not so worried about the number as I am about what is the frequency rate doing. It should also decrease year over year, because if they have a good safety program, they should be managing it so people aren't getting hurt. So this frequency rate is a measurement of how much are people being injured. If it's going the wrong way, right, if the frequency rate is going the wrong way, then the problem is that there's whatever they're doing in terms of safety probably needs some help. The other reason I want you to use the frequency rate is if, let's say, they've grown by leaps and bounds. So if they've doubled their employee staff but kept their frequency the same, right? They have the same number of claims but double the staff, it's going to look different. So I want you to normalize it and use the rate. Then the last thing that I want you to look at is the number of litigated files. You should be able to get this information. It's coded this way. And the number of litigated files should decrease year over year as well. Now, if the litigation rate for the claims in their entirety is over like 10% of the claims, that's very telling information for somebody like me. And I look at it as part of the whole, so I don't expect you to know that. But if they have 50 claims and 10 of them are litigated, then that's a red flag also. Remember that litigation drives severity in workers' compensation, so you want to be really cognizant of files that are going into litigation. It tells you two things. It tells you the effectiveness of the communication and the claims management program at the location, and that's an important thing. And it also tells you the effectiveness of the communication of the adjuster. Questions about litigation or any of these points of information?
You may be covering this later, but one question I have is, let's say I see that the frequency rate and the average cost are not great for the company. And I believe that as the new CEO, I might be able to impact the culture and make a change that would reduce that number, because that goes straight to my bottom line.
Absolutely.
What resources would you have, I guess, available to help the new CEO?
So I'm going to touch on industry resources, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we do, because actually what you're asking me speaks to exactly how I get to spend most of my time. But the claims industry has a lot of resources around managing work comp. There are loss control professionals who can help speak to cultural influences, and those are available through many of the carriers. An experienced claims adjuster can actually give you a lot of information about how your work comp program is performing. And when I was adjusting claims, I used to get calls from CEOs and COOs who would say, well, how is this location performing? Or the risk manager would call and want to know. And I'd know, because that's what adjusters do for a living. What Lockton does is we serve as a resource and an advocate and a liaison for our clients. So when one of my clients has an issue or we're setting up a new program, we do a couple of things. We talk to our clients about what are your goals, what are your objectives. I collect essentially the same information I just went through, and I get their perception of how their claims management program is working. And there is a direct correlation between the culture of the company and the way the work comp claims go. There just is. So your question is a really excellent question. And I do a couple of things. I make sure that we put in place a process that's easy to report claims and a process that's easy to communicate. And to a CEO, the best piece of advice I can give is to make sure that whoever's handling the claims has the ability to talk to anybody up or down the line. For example, if I'm managing claims at a location and I'm having trouble with return to work, I need to have somebody, perhaps the person who runs all of operations, to talk to a supervisor in a shop or do something like that says, yeah, we do return to work and we're serious. Senior level support is critically important in managing claims well.
I'm going to show my ignorance. What do you mean by return to work?
So when people get hurt, you can either go back, regular job. I could go back to my regular job if I did about anything. I broke a bone, whatever, I could come back. If you have a physical job, for instance, you injure your back and it's heavy lifting, then I think it becomes more difficult, because if you've hurt your back, going back to a heavy lifting job would be difficult, right? So we talk about return to work, and it's, so Todd, who got hurt, nobody likes to present with me because they're always injured when they present with me. But so Todd got hurt and he hurt his back and he has a 10-pound lifting restriction. Well, as the claims person that we can accommodate that, but he has a supervisor who won't. So in other words, they won't return to work literally means, can that person come back to work in some capacity? And it's one of the things that we talk about a lot, because if you leave somebody at home, they watch TV. And if you've ever been home watching TV during the day, it's all lawyer commercials. Have you ever noticed that? All of it. It's very depressing to me when I'm home during a day, because it's all lawyer commercials and it just makes me crazy. Anyway, so they stay home, they watch lawyer commercials, and they hire attorneys. The other thing is, people are, when you're used to spending your time at work and then you're gone for a few weeks, it's really hard on the employee, because they sort of decide nobody likes them. So if you can bring them back in, it sort of keeps the momentum going, and it's really a very effective way to manage work comp. Does that help?
That was very illuminating. I always wondered why all those commercials are on in the afternoon.
Yeah,
okay.
Because you have some poor soul who's sitting out there and they can't go back to work. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Next slide. So the next part of the due diligence is what I think of as a policy review. And it's not insurance policy review. It's just taking all the things that they tell you they do and looking at what their reality is. So for instance, if they say, so we have our lag time report, and you know that the industry says we want claims reported within 3 days, but you look at their lag time report and the average is 10 days, right? Then there's a disconnect between what they tell you they're doing and they're doing. So it's very important to figure that out. Now, the next part of the question usually is, well, what's good? And that actually depends on the industry. And I break this down into two parts. If it's centralized, so everything goes through one central system, then my expectation is that their lag time will be less. It will be, for instance, 3, 4, 5 days. But if you are working in a situation where it's decentralized, you have field employees. We have a client that does the gas line finders. So they're all field people. They're out roaming around, and their lag time isn't very good, because everybody's out working and they get hurt in the field, and then they have to catch up with their supervisor who has to do paperwork. And so there is some benchmarking involved. But if it's within a 7-day period, I'm going to tell you that's really pretty good. If it's more than 14 days, it's kind of a danger, Will Robinson, you should be careful kind of a situation. Okay. So that's that piece of information. Then we're going to talk about return to work programs. And like I said, I've never talked to anybody who told me they didn't have good return to work. And I'm also here to tell you that most of the time they don't have a good return to work. So how do you figure that out, right? You're a layman, you're not a work comp person. How can you actually tell? So there's a couple of ways you can tell. One is to simply say, how do you manage a situation when there are physical restrictions? And you'll get one of two answers. And the one is, we find them work, no matter what. And the other is, we have written job descriptions and we compare them to the information given to us by the provider. I actually like the second one better because it's much more thoughtful. What studies show is that return to work can operate a couple of ways. One, you can bring everybody back and have them count paper clips, and that happens. And I used to do a lot of work in Iowa, and I had a client that they pressed metal. They were an aftermarket auto parts, and they had the biggest press in North America. When you were in their parking lot, you could feel this thing hit the ground. So they had put together a return to work program, and it involved taking a threaded clip that weighed an ounce, putting it on a threaded spindle and just doing this. And if it was threaded right, it would drop to the bottom. Somebody had to do that. It was good return to work that way. And they even fixed it so if you had a hand problem, you could place it, and then they had a foot tap and a puff of air would do that. Once they filled up the spindle, then they put it aside. But they then put it under stairs against a wall. And that's where it kind of went a little crazy. I was with them up until that point in time. Nobody ever lasted in that job more than half a day. It was great. It really was good return to work. But you have to bear in mind that these are people who did get hurt in the scope and course of their employment. And I think it's really important that you make sure that the work they're coming back to does add value. When it was it was crowded. It was punitive. But the physical piece of it was fabulous. But anyway, you're going to find one of those too. So when it's thoughtful, that's the kind of return to work program that you actually want, because it means that they are being careful and they're being respectful. And I find that to be critical in workers' compensation claims management.
I guess the moral of that story is don't treat your workers like Harry Potter's relatives
Yes.
did.
Yes. Don't be the boy in the cupboard under the stairs. Agreed.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had employers that bring people who've had shoulder surgery and want them to come back the next day. I don't recommend that, because if you've ever had any orthopedic injuries, you know it takes a little while to get yourself back together. So anyway, that's one of the ways that you can tell if they have a good return to work program. Another way you can tell is if the number of lost time cases that they have is more than about 25% of the overall caseload. So if they have 100 cases, I would expect 25 of them to be what we call lost time, which means they can't work for various and sundry reasons. If it's significantly more than that, so if 50 of the 100 cases are lost time cases, that means that they don't have a good return to work program. So that's another way that you can tell. It's marked out that way on the loss run, but that's another way that I can tell. And I don't even have to go to the location, and I can tell that. The third thing to think about, and I touched on this before, is the relationship with the medical provider. So when you say to them, so-and-so got hurt, what do you do? If the answer is, well, we use the emergency room. So the emergency room, if you treat it like a revolving door, is probably the single most expensive way to get people treatment. And the industry has done a lot of work around managing this initial cost. So if they say we have a clinic and, we send them to the ER at night, that's a reasonable answer. But what I like to see is use of a clinic, right? Like I talked about, somebody who partners, and that's the best. The use of urgent care facilities, or if they say the phrase nurse triage, and I'll explain that in a minute, that's probably the best answer. And I'll be surprised if you don't find some of that. But nurse triage simply means if somebody gets hurt, when Todd got hurt, I gave him a phone number and I had him call the nurse, and he said, I've hurt my back. And the nurse takes the information and says, I think you should, go home, put ice on it. In the morning, I'll call you back and we'll decide what to do. And the reason that that's important is that people who get hurt at work, if it were their dollar, they would act differently than if it's the employer's dollar. So I've seen a lot of situations where they'll tweak something and they have to go to the ER. But if they tweak their back at home, they'd have been like, I'm going to wait and call my doctor in the morning. This just normalizes it a little bit. And it allows people to go get cost-effective medical care, right? Emergency rooms are great, but there should be an actual emergency engaged. So that's an important factor too. So a robust relationship with a provider or clinic is important. And once you are in place as the CEO, the other suggestion I have is look at the health systems in your geographic area, because a lot of times they're really happy to share resources and ideas. with the companies in their area because it's good for them. And it's actually good for you. So don't hesitate to reach out to a robust health system in your area if you have one.
Kathy, I was going to ask a question of you. I'm actually talking to another searcher that's close to making a deal happen in a plumbing business in Florida. So about 13 employees, and our business has been in operation for about 15 years. What types of things should he be thinking about as he's looking through all items? He's doing diligence on every diligence front there is, and now comes insurance, and of course, plumbing, manual labor. Talk to us about what that looks like, and then maybe even some scenarios you've seen over time in the plumbing business that, good return to work programs have been able to benefit, and or just ways to manage a safer environment so workers' comp claims are not severe if they do occur.
Good. So that's a great question. So one of the first things I would do is I would look at the policies that are in place to make sure that you have, again, fixed it so your employees can tell you as quickly as possible that there's an injury. I think that's important. And how do you do that? I get to ask this a lot, especially when it's not centralized and everybody's out on their route and they're busy. And I think it comes from things as simple as have a toolbox talk once a week and say, let's be safe. We want to send you home in the same condition that you showed up at work. If you get hurt, I want to know, call me my cell phone anytime, because the thing to remember is, as the owner of that company, he sets the pace for how this all gets handled. And if he says, I just want to know so we can get you the right care, that's critical. And that starts before anybody gets hurt. The second part is make sure that the employees understand, if they need help. In Florida, they get to choose their own medical, but you can say, we fixed it with this clinic who knows how we work, go there. And if you need, call me, and then we'll figure out if you have to go to the clinic. That's the second thing that I would do. Return to work is probably the hardest part because of the weights that are engaged in plumbing. Because if you've ever picked up plumbing materials, some of them are amazingly heavy and others are not. And you have to be aware of what somebody's weight limits are and actually how much some of the parts that they're using are. And I think that's actually what's always made it tricky. So the best thing I know to do is to figure out how much typical things weigh. For instance, I know cast iron bathtubs are awkward, and I think they weigh, I'm going to make it up, 150 pounds. So if you have a person that's injured, you want to make sure that if they have to go do that, somebody at least goes and gets it in place. They can maybe do everything around it, but they need help with certain parts, and you may have to double up. I will also tell you it's absolutely worth it if you can manage it to make those kinds of accommodations, because getting people back to work really does help save money. And these are all actions I would try and take before anybody got hurt. But I'm also a realist. And if that happens, then there are other ways to address it. But that's what I would do.
Okay, that's helpful. Another question I had, and then again, anybody that has a specific question related to a target that they're looking at, or just maybe a business they're currently running, feel free to hop off mute and ask the question, certainly to Kathy. But I'm curious, Kathy, what is one of the biggest misconceptions around workers' compensation? I'm curious to know that, because I think there is a little bit of that going on sometimes.
So I think the first misconception is that denying claims is the fastest and cheapest way to manage your claims program. That is about as false as anything I can say. And I'll tell you and I'll explain why. Work comp is a no-fault system. And if a case gets denied, then you lose the ability to direct medical care, to accommodate physical restrictions. You really can't control the case. And so if we talk about the gentleman in Florida, right, Florida is very employee friendly. And the likelihood that they'll sustain the denial, that's what we call it. So for instance, the adjuster might say, we're going to deny this because we don't like them. Well, if they sue, and they almost always do, then what you have to know is that the ALJs, the judges in the work comp system, they're not going to uphold that. The only ways that denials actually work is to have them founded on the law. And the laws in really every state are meant to give the injured worker the benefit of the doubt. Now, let me give you a moment of history about comp. Before work comp existed, the only thing you could do if you got hurt at work was to use the civil system. If you have ever accessed the civil system, the thing you know is it is slow and painful, and it takes a lot of money, right? Because you have to pay a lawyer. So if I worked for an employer in 1905, because believe it or not, work comp's only been around since 1912. So if I had one, and let's say I worked on the railroad and my hand got amputated, so I could sue the railroad. That's it. It would take years and years and years for me to make any kind of recovery. So I'm here, I have a family I cannot support. We go to the poorhouse, right? And I don't get medical care. So workers' compensation is designed to overcome those obstacles. So what's the trade? The trade is that the big settlements that you hear about are never work comp settlements. So what might be a $3 million loss if it were civil is a $100,000 loss in a comp case. It's vastly different. So that's what an employer gets when a case is in the work comp system, is the overall cost ends up being lower. The way that the courts view this is because the employee has less to recover, they give the employee the benefit of the doubt all the time. So when I run into somebody, and I do, that says, oh, we deny and delay and defend everything, then I know that their claims end up costing more. And because the courts don't like it, and when they figure out that's how that employer works, then they start to award larger and larger settlements to the injured workers. So that's probably the first biggest myth that I hear. And the second biggest myth I hear is that all work comp cases are fraudulent. I've done this actually about 34 years. In that period of time, I have seen 5 fraudulent work comp cases, not 5% or 500, 5. And usually at this point, somebody says, how can that be? Well, there's something like $98 billion a year spent in work comp. But most of the time, people suffer an injury and they don't like their life. Like, they may get sort of hurt, but they may not like their life much. So let's say they have a 2-year-old. Well, this person gets hurt. They'd rather be home, so the healing takes longer. Fraud in comp is actually somebody who collects money while they're collecting work comp benefits. It'd be like collecting unemployment and work comp at the same time. You can't, that's illegal. So the other biggest myth is that people are fraudulent. Actually, no, most people really just want to get better and get back to their lives. So that would be the second thing that I hear. So.
Yeah, that's helpful context. Kathy, a question came through in the chat talking about home health and daycare businesses and any context around work comp related to home health and daycare that you could talk about.
Sure. So I have a client that provides home health services. And anytime that you have employees that are not in a controlled environment, as in they're in somebody else's house, it's problematic. And it's problematic on the front end when the claim occurs, and it's problematic on the back end. And the reason is because we don't know what they're going to run into at either point. So somebody may get sent to provide care to Susie Smith, and then it turns out that Susie Smith is not thin, and she has to get turned over, and the person who went didn't know they'd have to do that, and they suffer a back injury, or they'll slip and fall on water on the floor, or they'll step on a Lego and fall down, or something happens, and we don't have control of that environment. That causes a problem, right? Then on the backside of it, because we can't control the environment, it's harder to take them back. Just like it's harder to take the plumbers back because of the unpredictability of the physical nature of the work. It's harder to do. I have a couple of suggestions. One is to be cognizant of the physical person you're hiring to do the job. So what I mean when I say that is one of the first home health services I had hired a lot of people over 60. I'm not knocking people over 60. I am over 60, but they had a huge surge of injuries because these folks weren't physically capable of doing the kind of work that was being expected of them. And I think you have to be very clear with your employees about what kind of work is expected. If you're in that situation and you really want to be cognizant and careful, there is actually something called post-offer pre-employment testing. And what all that really means is Todd is healed, right? So now his back's better and he's come to me because he wants a job. And I say, great, Todd, I want to hire you for my home health care, but so I'm offering you the job, but first you have to pass the physical. And he goes and he sees the doctor, and maybe they do lifting or they look and they find out Todd has in fact had a fusion before. And they go and then they say, Todd, did you have a lumbar fusion? And you say, why, yes. And I get that information because the question then is, gosh, can you really do this job? Or, yes, I can, but I have a 150-pound weight limit. Well, at least I know, because ultimately I don't want you to get hurt. Now, what makes it legal is the fact that you've offered the job, but before they actually become employed, they have to pass this test. In the clinic that I told you about earlier, they can actually help you with that. Most of them do some variation of this, and it can be super, super helpful. So if you have the ability to do that, it'll help you screen out people who physically cannot do the job, because that's what happens the most. So
fascinating.
Yep. So I want to touch on intangibles. If you'll go to the next screen. And when I was thinking about what did I want to tell you, right? What do I really want you to think about? If you can go and visit the office or visit this location, there are 2 or 3 things to be aware of. First of all, do you actually see a safety person, right? And if you do, and you're going to go tour or walk around, ask them to go with you, right? Ask the primary claims contact person to go with you. Because if they are liked and respected, the employees in the face, in the office, the facility, the location, whatever, look at them. If they are not liked, respected, or trusted, people literally look the other way when they approach them, right? And this has happened more times than I care to tell you about. Because what it means is that the people who are the face of work comp for that company are not in good standing with the rest of the employees. And what's interesting to me is when it's gone bad, you just see it. It's just very interesting. If they're well integrated into the business, people stop them, ask their opinion, kid with them. It's a much different scenario. So when I talk about intangibles, that's one of the things I would tell you, especially if your initial view of your data says, gosh, they seem to have a lot of claims. Go figure that out. I once ran into a claims woman, and I thought she was scary. And there isn't much that scares me, but there were a lot of people who were not very educated. They made file cabinets in this place. And I thought, gosh, if I don't want to talk to her, I can't imagine what it would be like to be some poor soul on the floor who'd have to come and talk to her, because she was one of those kind of, she just was an angry person, and you could tell. So, and I don't have a black and white answer for you. Claims people think in grays, but I would pay attention to that. I think that tells you tremendous amounts about the culture of the business. The other thing is your gut, the importance of your own instinct. Talk to those who are managing claims, right? As you're walking around, talk to them. If they say, I do my best to help people, right? Because it's a golden rule thing. And then you know that they're in good hands and it's going well. It doesn't mean it can't be improved, but at least you're starting from a positive viewpoint. And if your gut says to you, this is weird and wrong, it probably is, right? And when I do my work comp trainings, we do a lot of them. It's one of the things we tell the attendees. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And you need to pay attention to that instinct. I think it's critical that you do that. Work comp is about people, and it's people who get hurt and are at a bad time of their life, or at a tricky time because they've suffered this injury and maybe can't work. And I think it's really critical that we pay attention to that in order to get the best result for everybody. Next slide. Maybe done.
Yeah, I think that's the end of
That's it. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Cool. What questions do you have? What else can I answer for you guys?
I wanted to add that your experience is so invaluable and having people trust their gut. And I definitely would concur on the nurse triage point that you made earlier. I had an incident when I was working at my one of my companies where it was not work related, but they had nurse triage, and it actually ended up saving my eyesight.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. I was probably gonna delay because I was tired, I was hungry. I was like, well, maybe this will go away. And then she said, no, you need to go straight to the emergency room. So it's really, it was invaluable, and I'm sure it saved my eyesight, which is pretty darn valuable.
That's
to
critical.
me personally.
That's critical. I'm at the point now, I'm encouraging all my clients to think about it, because I think it's an important tool and serves people well. I'm glad. I'm going to tell that story the next time I do training.
Yeah. So it's not just that they're there to try to mitigate claims. It's that they're responsible for ensuring your well-being as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are accounting tricks. I'm reading your note. There are ways claims can be hidden. One of the ways, believe it or not, is that there are employers who have like a credit card for company expenses or whatever, and they'll actually start paying the cost of the claim almost just as like not the slush fund, but out of like petty cash. And I am against that. I cannot tell you how against that I am. Because a couple reasons. One is, if you report a claim, the medical costs get vetted pretty heavily, and there's a lot of containment that goes along with that, and that's critical. But literally, they'll go pay it out of a fund, and they never ever show up. And I have had locations that had thousands of dollars wrapped up in self-payment of claims. I don't know if that's a trick or not, but I know they do it, and it doesn't show up as a claim. And the worst part about it is they'll pay for it for a year, and then suddenly they'll want to report it. And because it hasn't been handled right, the costs are usually more, 2 to 3 times more. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Some of these questions, I know who they're coming from because, well, obviously there's one in the chat there, but a previous one because we've spoken, and I'd make the offer to anybody that's wanting to look at a business, and if you're looking through due diligence and an LOI is signed, let me know and be happy to help look through some of the insurance concerns or lack thereof with the target that you're looking at. So, Kathy, I wanted to thank you for deploying your 30 plus years of experience on today's call for all these individuals, and it's just really helpful. You guys can always reach out to me, and I can direct questions to Kathy, and I'll just put my information in the chat real quick, and so you can do that. And then
Yep.
we also got a request, Karen, to send over this PowerPoints, and we'd love to share it as well with the group.
Yep. And what I'll do is right after this session is I will email it out to everybody who registered, and I will put it on the event landing page so everybody will have it. And I want to thank both of you for Todd for organizing this, Kathy for sharing your expertise. I think it was really insightful about just walk around and see how the safety person is being treated. I think that's invaluable insight that you shared with our folks today. So really appreciate it. And I know we have one coming up, I believe, next month on surety bonds, which I have no idea of what that is. I remember reading about them in law school for some case at some point, maybe my first year, which was a long time ago. So I look forward to learning about it then.
Certainly. Well, and I noticed that some of the folks on the line were Kellogg folks. So I'm also a Kellogg alum, and it's great to see other Kellogg folks here. So reach out with anything. It's always good to know other people from other Wildcats. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm going to stay on the line in case anybody has any questions about where to find something on Searchfunder, or if you just want to chat about the Olympics or trials or anything like that. I'm also happy to do that. So I'll stay on for a few moments if you like. But thank you again, Todd and Kathy. This was excellent. I learned a lot. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks, Karen.
And